This week, American President Donald Trump made a series of statements that prompted the Kremlin to start preparing for the worst. And at the same time, they intensified their attacks on European countries to test the resolve of Donald Trump himself. And although there is still a lull in negotiations to end the Russian-Ukrainian war, this week there was a significant meeting between the presidents of Ukraine and the United States. In this episode, we will discuss how Trump managed to surprise everyone at this meeting with Zelensky, and whether it will have any practical consequences. In particular, what did Zelensky and Trump talk about in the United States? What was left behind the scenes? Did Donald Trump really change his attitude toward the Russian Federation? And how did Russia respond to the change in Trump's rhetoric? We will discuss all these questions and more in this episode and summarize the results of this week of negotiations. I'm Alexei Pichi. It's September 27th, and before we start, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and my Telegram channel, Pichi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as it comes in. Also, please like this episode and write any detailed comment under this video. So, the main event of the past week was another meeting between the presidents of Ukraine and the United States, which took place in New York. Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump had a conversation on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly on September 23, and after the meeting with Zelensky, the United States President wrote on the social network Truth Social that Russia is a paper tiger, and Ukraine can fully restore its territorial integrity with the support of the European Union, and then perhaps go even further, meaning the capture of Russian territory itself. Well, next I'll quote Donald Trump. After I familiarized myself with and fully understood the military and economic situation of Ukraine and Russia, and after seeing the economic problems this causes in Russia, I believe that Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and reclaim all of Ukraine within its original borders. Well, according to Donald Trump's note, the restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity is possible over time, with patience and financial support from Europe, particularly NATO. Well, Trump also promised that the United States will continue to supply weapons to NATO so that the alliance can use them at its discretion, that is, to give them to Ukraine. Today, September 27. Zelensky boasted that Ukraine and the United States have practically concluded an arms deal worth almost $100 billion, but its details have not been disclosed yet. We will find out about it a little later. Subsequently, Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed this week that the change in Trump's rhetoric is related to information he received from the Ukrainian president during their meeting. Moreover, according to the president of Ukraine, his American counterpart supported Kyiv's right to strike back in response to attacks from the Russian Federation, especially targeting Russian energy infrastructure. Here's the quote. We discussed several promising ideas to bring peace closer, and I hope they will yield quick results. And on September 27, Zelensky once again confirmed that Trump welcomes and supports strikes against Russia based on the principle of an eye for an eye. If Russia promises us a blackout, for example in Kyiv, it must understand that the same blackout will happen in Moscow. As for the sanctions, nothing has changed here. Earlier, Donald Trump stated that before the United States imposes new sanctions on Russia, all European Union countries must stop buying energy resources from the Russian Federation, particularly Hungary and Slovakia. And during the conversation, Zelensky expressed the opinion that Slovakia could stop buying Russian energy resources under certain conditions. Quote, I had a conversation with the Prime Minister of Slovakia. I think they need certain alternative options and then they will accept the idea. And interestingly today, on September 27, Zelensky announced that already in October, Ukraine will offer Slovakia alternative ideas for oil and gas supplies, so that Slovakia can easily give up energy resources from Russia. And he added that we can offer the same to Hungary, but Hungary is behaving inadequately. In turn, Trump, let me remind you, said that he would talk to the Hungarian Prime Minister and stated, I think Orban will stop buying Russian oil. If I talk to him, I will talk to him. However, that same day, Hungary's Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó said his country will keep buying Russian oil, even if Donald Trump demands otherwise. And later Trump called Viktor Orban. And after that conversation, he stated that Hungary simply physically cannot give up Russian oil because there are no alternative routes. This issue is resolved. Although, let me remind you, Hungary can transport oil and gas through Croatia. There are alternative routes, Hungary just doesn't want to agree to them. In addition, Donald Trump has taken on another major buyer of Russian energy resources, that is Turkey. And during a meeting with the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he called on Ankara to at least reduce the purchase of energy resources from Russia. And as a leverage, the American president is considering the possibility of once again allowing Turkey to participate in the production of F-35 fighter jets, that is, to return Turkey to this program. And in addition, they have already signed a deal to purchase 200 Boeing aircraft. The deal has already been signed. And they signed a deal to purchase aircraft. And the purchase deal according to his words. Quote, "The change in tone of the United States president is related to his meeting with the Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky. United States Secretary of State Mark Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov also met during the United Nations General Assembly. Several conditions were presented to the Russian minister during the meeting, but it was completely fruitless." The United States Secretary of State repeated President Trump's call to stop the killing and the need for Moscow to take significant steps toward achieving the goal of a long-term settlement of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Here's the quote. This is the statement published on the United States State Department website after Mark Rubio met Sergei Lavrov, which indicates that there was no result after it. What influenced Donald Trump's opposition? Opinions differ. Western media have differing views on both the United States president's sharp change in rhetoric and its reasons. Well, for example, according to the Wall Street Journal, Trump administration officials who advocate for a more decisive stance in supporting Ukraine still managed to convey the real situation on the battlefield in Ukraine to the United States president. In particular, these are Kit Kellogg and Mike Waltz, who was an advisor on security powers and now he is the United States representative to the United Nations. This pair managed to convey to Trump the position that Ukraine needs to be supported. In addition, the British king also inspired Donald Trump with the right ideas, after which he began to change his position. In particular, Trump's advisors emphasized Russia's insignificant progress on the front. In addition, during the meeting with Zelensky, Trump received information about a new counter-offensive plan by the armed forces of Ukraine, which would require American support. That's why he said Ukraine should try to reclaim its territories and see what happens next. And The Telegraph, a British publication, wrote that after months of statements about Ukraine losing its territories to the Russian Federation, as well as statements about peace negotiations, Trump made a dramatic turnaround. The publication notes that in his latest statements, Trump's points about supporting Ukraine and the United States are no longer present. Moreover, the American leader is essentially shifting responsibility for Ukraine onto Europe and NATO. Reuters holds a similar opinion. The news agency's sources, commenting on Trump's loud statement, warned that the American president may be signaling that now it is Europe that should help Ukraine, while the United States is simply washing its hands of the situation. A high-ranking Eastern European diplomat noted that Trump's comments about Ukraine are aimed at showing that he is beginning to distance himself, sending a signal that this is exclusively a European issue. At the same time, the New York Post, Donald Trump's favorite newspaper in Donbass, writes that Trump's insistence that Ukraine can reclaim all occupied territories is a strategic move aimed at trying to draw Moscow into the negotiation process. Sources from this publication in the White House noted that such statements do not indicate a change in Washington's policy, but rather serve as a negotiation tactic to put pressure on Russia, which currently shows no interest in a ceasefire. Well, for now, Trump is just making statements. As before, he hasn't taken any real action or put pressure on Russia yet. This should be taken into account. Moreover, there's no guarantee that after another call to dictator Putin, the United States president won't change his rhetoric to the opposite again. At the same time, Trump's confirmed lifting of restrictions on the purchase of American weapons for Ukraine is a positive signal for the future. In addition, Trump's statement that Ukraine can and should strike Russian territory, including with long-range weapons if Russia strikes peaceful Ukrainian cities, this is also very important. It solidifies the position of the American president, and of course this position can be appealed to. Overall, in political and diplomatic terms, this week has been, in my opinion, quite successful for Ukraine. We have received very strong rhetorical support so far, but we need to hold on to this rhetorical support and turn it into effective support, which simply turns into hardware, into the very weapons and finances that Ukraine needs so much right now. I'll leave it at that. Friends, write your thoughts about this week in the comments. What did you notice this week regarding our interactions with our Western partners? Maybe you noticed some unusual behavior from Russians. So write your thoughts in the comments, I will definitely read them. Maybe I missed something, so I invite you to the comments for discussion. Remember to subscribe to my Telegram channel Patchy News, the link is in the video description. Also like this episode. It's very important. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye everyone.